Welcome to the hypertrophy section of this portal. Now first of all, I'd like to make some observations relating to the fact that if this component, hypertrophy or putting on muscle size, if this becomes an obsession of yours to the extent that other important components of fitness are neglected or perhaps even missed out, what you'll find is that this will generally decline your body into a place of dysfunction and eventual injury, through which of course you won't be able to train and potentially lose those size gains that you've been working so hard to achieve. So it's pertinent for me to share some knowledge here and now in an attempt to prevent you from arriving at that dysfunctional place. Or if you already have arrived there and you are in pain and you find that you get injured often, then this knowledge will also assist you to reverse that situation, to regenerate it. So I'll share those details shortly, and then after that I'm going to share, of course, some information relating to how you can most effectively put on muscle size and also maintain that moving forward. Now, one thing that you'll be aware of when you look in the mirror is that what is most visible are the muscles on the front of the body. That would be your anterior deltoids, the front of your shoulder there, your biceps, your chest, the six-pack, your abs down the front there, although they might not be visible. Also the quadriceps on the front of the thighs. All of these muscles are immediately within our vision and therefore can take a lot more of our attention, even if only unconsciously, in the gym. Now the issue with this is that what is out of sight is sometimes out of mind, and I refer to the muscles behind us, the posterior muscle groups, and it's their job to actually hold us up against gravity into a strong postural position that keeps you in an efficient alignment but also supports your organ system as well. So it's very important that we don't become overly obsessed with strengthening those anterior muscle groups, such as, for example, the chest. It's the chest's muscle group's role to bring the arms forward and shoulders forward. It's the abdominal's role to bring the chest down toward the ground or further toward the pelvis. And so this will actually perpetuate the position that you naturally find yourself gravitating into if you're a corporate person that spends a lot of time sitting down at the desk. You find yourself naturally slouching, right? That's called kyphosis and round shoulders. So we want to actually reverse this condition, not perpetuate it when we're training. So fortunately, the training programs in this section of the portal are actually balanced in that regard. If you follow those, they should keep you relatively balanced in terms of front and back, up and down, your whole body, the external muscle groups there. Now, what's also relevant to address is that when we're focused just on external muscle groups, on hypertrophy, often the ones on the inside of the body, they can become neglected. So it's easy to become out of balance, not only front to back, up and down, but also from inside to outside. There's a few components here to consider. Now, the issue with this is that the muscle groups on the outside of the body that you can see in the mirror, and of course the beach, well, it's their job to move the bones, to generate action. It's the muscle groups on the inside, their job, because they're closer to the bones, is to hold the bones in correct position. That would be called postural alignment, and also to stabilize the joint structure to prevent you from becoming injured. So the problem can potentially arise when you strengthen your external muscle groups too much through a focus of only hypertrophy, is that your external capacity for movement becomes enhanced. You become a lot stronger, but your internal capacity for structural strength does not become stronger because you haven't been focused on that. Thereby, of course, this is a recipe for injury, and commonly that can take the place of a low back strain. You might roll your ankle, you might become injured in your knee joint, you might get a rotator cuff strain in the side of your shoulder there. That's a common one, an AC joint sprain. These are all injuries that often come up and can actually be avoided if you simply keep a balanced approach to your training. And you would do that by focusing, for example, on the exercises contained in the Structural Stability Training Program series in this portal. So please keep that in mind if you want to keep yourself more effectively in balance. Now, another thing that's relevant to mention is that if you focus more on building hypertrophy and muscle size, well, the way that we achieve this is by contracting the muscles over and over again to exhaust them. Now, when muscle contracts, of course, this process is a process of shortening the muscles. And if you do that over time, many times, over a duration of years, you'll end up with, of course, bigger muscles, but potentially very tight muscles as well, if you don't do sufficient stretching. Now, the problem with this is that that can become an interference in the way that you naturally move. For example, your restricted range of motion might limit you from even bending down to pick something up off the ground or the couch or a chair, or reaching up above your head to a shelf. You can impinge your shoulder, you can hurt your back, you can create problems for yourself, which will be indicated by pain, which also tells us that you are inhibiting the nervous system, which is a kind of important component of your physiology. But what is less so obvious is that tension within the body can also inhibit the cardiovascular system. So, for example, if you were watering the garden with a hose, if you squeezed the hose, you'd limit the water from coming out of the hose, and thereby the flowers would not receive the nutrients. They wouldn't thereby grow as effectively, would they? And so it's also the same in the human body, that you are filled up with little hoses. These are called blood vessels, and when you have too much tension in your body, what you'll find is that will limit your ability to deliver nutrients from that fabulous diet that you're consuming to the working cells, so that they can, of course, grow stronger and bigger. So that's something else that you might want to consider, and you can avoid that by simply going to the release section and undertaking those stretches that have been detailed there, thereby keeping your body relatively more in balance and, of course, free from tension. You'll feel a lot better from it as well. So that's some things to consider about if you are finding yourself gravitating just to this area of the portal. Just think about that and try to keep an even-minded balance there in approach to your training. You'll find that you get a lot more out of it. Now, as it relates to how to actually put on muscle size effectively, I mentioned it's about contracting your muscles. You've probably already discovered, but more specifically, you really need to exhaust your muscles to the point where you can feel that burn, that lactic acid building up within the system. So what goes with that is the pump, right? And so after a good hypertrophy training workout, which would include various range of exercises with rep ranges between perhaps 6 reps to even 15 or 20 repetitions, depending on what your approach is, then that will generate that pump within the muscles, which is actually more fluid moving in between the cells involved. That's called intracellular fluid increase. So the reason that your body does that is so that you can effectively remove the metabolic waste from the working muscles out of the muscular system, and also to, of course, to deliver nutrients, energy to the muscles so you can continue to work at a higher rate. So that's why you get the pump, and you achieve that by exhausting it. You'll see in the programs I've given a rep range mostly of between 6 to 12 or 12 to 15 to begin with, and this is because there's a couple of different ranges of intensity that you'll want to be working at. To generate that burn and that pump, you will actually generate that more effectively with a higher rep range, because you need to keep the muscles working. So between perhaps even 12 or 20 repetitions, you'll find you'll get more of that burn and more of that pump working at that range. And so that'll increase the intracellular fluids, and you'll get that size gain in that way. However, if you want to increase your size moving forward, that needs to be translated into what is called increased protein content within the muscle tissue itself. Now, this is where the lower rep range comes in. This is where strength training comes in. Essentially, if you are putting a high tensile force through your muscles, if you are straining very hard, that's going to test the muscle fiber's ability to hold together, and so it will naturally need to increase the protein content within the muscular tissue, within the actin and myosin cross bridges that actually grip onto each other and create that muscular contraction. So by dropping your rep range low and straining very hard, you'll achieve that. You'll also result in much more tone within your muscle. You'll notice that your muscle tissue won't just be puffy and pumped up, but also firm. And that is a result of you increasing the quality of the muscle tissue. So that's why you need to include some strength training with lower rep ranges, but also some higher rep ranges to get that pump as well. Now, the other important component that is obvious is that you'll need to take in an effective diet. And there is a diet section in this portal, so I suggest go to that. And you've probably already looked on the internet or heard a fair amount about what you need to do. And the first place that you will probably be directed to is protein powders, protein bars, amino acid supplements, fatty acids, and all of these additional, what I would say is complications, metabolically speaking. And it's certainly true that you need to bring in more energy and certainly more protein if you want to put on more muscle size. However, what I suggest is if you want to remain in a direction that is headed toward well-being, is that you try to achieve that through natural whole food sources, and just contemplate this before you go to put something in your mouth. Could you find this food growing somewhere in nature? Is it a natural whole food, or is it a man-made product? I mean, you're probably not going to find protein powders growing on trees, right? Likewise with bars and specific supplements. And I'm not saying that these are bad things. What I'm saying is that is an additional complication for your body to process. You could probably arrive at the place that you desire to in terms of your muscle size by simply eating whole foods, cutting out those unnatural man-made foods, and thereby you will actually rise into a higher place of well-being. Your system will be more efficient, more clear, more functional, and your energy will elevate. You'll feel a lot better. So I hope you consider that. Once again, go to the dietary section. Hopefully there'll be some more hints and tips you can take on there. All the best with applying this information, and I'll hope to hear some good feedback from you shortly.